We live in the ordinary. We see ordinary, hear ordinary, smell it and taste ordinary. Ordinary surrounds us. Even what's new becomes ordinary. The good and the bad becomes ordinary. Struggle and trouble become ordinary. A broken world feels ordinary. And so we question the ordinary. Where did the ordinary come from? What started the ordinary? Was the ordinary always ordinary? Is there more than just ordinary? Is there something extraordinary? What would make it extraordinary? Could it make us extraordinary? Walking, talking, being extraordinary. Knowing and seeing extraordinary. Spreading and growing extraordinary. Healing our world extraordinary. Do you want more? Do you need more? Why not seek more? Let's explore the extraordinary.
Everybody, it is great to be here today. My name is Alex. I'm one of the ministers here at Andover Community Church, and I want to start with a bit of a question. Actually, Chris has already sort of teed this up really nicely, which is, have you ever seen something or experienced something extraordinary? Have you ever seen or experienced something that's extraordinary? Maybe you've met somebody who is extraordinary, or somebody who's able to do extraordinary things. It can be very inspiring, can't it? I had a bit of that experience this week. I was watching a documentary I was really excited about called The Shark Whisperer. It came out on Netflix, I think. I don't know if anyone here may have seen it, but like lots of people in the world, I am completely petrified of sharks, sometimes in very irrational situations, but I'm also really fascinated by them too. And this documentary is all about this lady who is a diver and a shark conservationist from Hawaii, and her name, appropriately, is Ocean Ramsey. Can you believe it? And Ocean not only swims and dives with sharks, you'll see in a moment, but over years of observing them, she has been able to form a bond with sharks that defies belief. I mean, they are extraordinary photos, aren't they? And they are completely real. It is just unbelievable. And I was watching it, I was just captivated by this documentary because I was thinking, this is extraordinary. Now, Ocean's curiosity in sharks started when she was a child, when she first encountered a shark in the sea by herself. And unlike most people, she didn't swim away in fear, but found that she was curious about this creature. And that curiosity then developed as she grew up, and she's since dedicated her life to studying sharks, trying to raise awareness about them, because actually globally they're facing extinction, which would be incredibly bad news for the health of our oceans, amongst other things. And she also fights a variety of causes to protect and promote marine life and to protect our oceans, in fact. And she has this deep sense of purpose and calling in this. In the documentary, says she really believes this is the reason that she's put on this earth, which is incredible, isn't it? And what really struck me about Ocean is her ability to look beyond the ordinary, her ability to see what others can't see. And she's willing, isn't she, to break through boundaries, even boundaries of fear, to achieve something significant and to make a difference in the world. And we would say that somebody like Ocean is very much a visionary as much as she is an activist. She has this very clear vision of how she wants the world to be, or how she thinks the world should be, and it's not how the world is. There's a problem, isn't there? She sees this problem, and it's all for her around sharks and the oceans and the way that people are treating creation, actually, and she wants to make a difference. She wants to preserve life, preserve nature. And we need people in the world with vision, don't we? Vision is, in fact, the pathway to change. And actually, this can be for good or bad. But we need those people with the vision to lead the way. And there are so many examples of this in history. We could think of people who perhaps have campaigned for human rights. People like Martin Luther King Jr., whose famous dream and vision led this massive civil rights movement and achieved huge progress in racial equality. We might think of researchers or scientists, people like Marie Curie, whose desire to understand what others couldn't led her to discover how something like radiation could advance science and medicine and help save lives. And perhaps in more recent times, in the world of technology that is taking over, we might think of someone like Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, who had extraordinary vision for technological innovation, which, for those of us in the modern Western world, shapes the world we live in just such profound ways, whether we like it or not. And I could mention so many other people. Maybe somebody's coming to mind for you today, someone you can think of, a visionary who's changed the world. And whilst we need visionaries to help make the world a better place, we have to remember too that no one can actually change the world on their own. A visionary's role is actually to inspire and empower others to be agents of change, to help them see beyond the ordinary, to break through boundaries. That's the whole purpose of vision. And I was speaking to the team, the volunteers from ACE, who were here earlier. They had to leave because they're actually going to go and open up down in town to help meet needs of people locally. But they were saying how this all started. Their charity started with one person and a vision. And then others got on board with that vision. And now it's grown into this incredible charity doing so much for the local community. That's what vision is all about, isn't it? It's meant to drive change and to equip us. And actually, having vision is a very biblical concept. There's lots of examples of it as we read through the story of God in the Bible. But today we're going to look at a person that God gave a very vivid vision to. And it's a vision that I think is a vision for all of us. It's for all of humanity and all of God's creation. Now, the person we're looking at is an ancient person. They were known as a prophet. Their name is Ezekiel. We can read about Ezekiel in the Old Testament part of the Bible, a book appropriately named Ezekiel. And he lived 600 years, 6 centuries before Jesus, BCE, I think it is now. He was born in Jerusalem. He was the son of a priest. But then Ezekiel was taken into exile along with survivors of his people group after Jerusalem had been attacked and destroyed by Babylonians because the Babylonians were in power. They were the world empire of the time. Now, during his time in exile, Ezekiel received these visions and messages from God. That's what made him gave him that sort of status as a prophet. These messages, these visions were meant to be passed on to his people, the Hebrew people. And now you may have read this book, you may be aware of them, but some of them are very bizarre visions, and the way he acted them out are incredibly strange. To begin with, there was a lot to do with God's warnings from God and judgment from God, but then they sort of changed tact towards some amazing revelations. And the one that we're looking at today is an amazing vision that Ezekiel gets from God, and it's all about the future. In this vision, there's an angelic figure, like a man, we're told, who's his guide, who's Ezekiel's guide, and we could interpret this as an angel. Some commentators think this actually is Jesus. And this angelic guide is just there in the vision to take Ezekiel around these different places that he was familiar with, actually, and to show him what God was wanting to reveal. So in this one vision, Ezekiel is taken back to Jerusalem, where he's from, where he sees the city and the temple restored. But most significantly, he sees this river that's flowing out from the temple, a river that couldn't be there naturally. And his guide goes on to explain what this means, and this is what we're going to look at today. You may want to follow along. All the words for this are going to be on screen. It's quite a detailed and long sort of description. You may want to close your eyes and listen and see if you can imagine it. This is what is comprised in the vision. So the guide says this to Ezekiel. This river flows east through the desert into the valley of the Dead Sea. The waters of this stream will make the salty waters of the Dead Sea fresh and pure. There will be swarms of living things wherever the water of this river flows. Fish will abound in the Dead Sea, for its waters will become fresh. Life will flourish wherever this water flows. Fishermen will stand along the shores of the Dead Sea. Fish of every kind will fill the Dead Sea just as they do the Mediterranean. Fruit trees of all kind will grow along both sides of the river. The leaves of these trees will never turn brown and fall, and there will always be fruit on their branches. There will be a new crop every month, for they are watered by the river flowing from the temple. The fruit will be for food, and the leaves for healing. That's an incredible description, isn't it? And this is only part of the vision. If you want to go back and read it, there's so many other elements to it, but just one bit I'm focusing on today. It's incredibly beautiful, isn't it? And if there's anyone out there, a bit like I am, is a bit more of a visual thinker, I found an amazing sort of artistic interpretation of this vision that I really liked. I admit the figures in it are a little bit interesting, but I think the kind of concept of it brings to life that vision so well, isn't it? It shows how this vision, it may be rooted in the ordinary, sort of a scene that Ezekiel would have been familiar with, but as you can see, it goes far beyond the ordinary, the possible, doesn't it? And that's because this is a miraculous vision of how things could be and how one day they will be. We know that, don't we, through some of those details that we heard. The trees will never lose their leaves. There will always be fruit on their branches, new crop every month. This is alluding to a world which is familiar and recognizable, but somehow different, somehow extraordinary. And I think what this vision really draws on and is really meant to draw our attention to is that life-giving river. We actually mentioned it in the studio earlier about that sort of that river of life flowing from us. We know that actually it doesn't have a natural source. It didn't exist at the temple site in Jerusalem, but we are told that it has unique properties. Wherever it flows, it brings life. There will be swarms of living things. Life will flourish, and there'll be nourishment and healing. So what is the source of this life-giving river? Well, we're not actually told in this vision, but it does give us some clues. The puzzle is actually solved many centuries later by Jesus himself when he walked the earth. And in an account that we have that's written now in the New Testament part of the Bible by a man called John, who is a friend and follower of Jesus, we can read some really profound words that Jesus said about himself, and this answers the puzzle for us. Jesus said this: "Anyone who believes in me," that's Jesus, "may come and drink. For the scriptures declare, rivers of living water will flow from his heart." Rivers of living water will flow from their heart. Now, we don't know for certain, we can't know for certain which scriptures Jesus is referring to. It would certainly be the Old Testament part of the Bible that we have. Those were the Jewish scriptures. But most commentators think he's actually making a direct link to Ezekiel's vision here. And in which case, Jesus is telling us plainly, he's answering that puzzle for us, that he's saying he is the source of that life-giving river that's in the vision. And in fact, in other parts of the Bible, you can read that Jesus is the source of all life. And what is also really significant is where Jesus is when he is making this claim. Jesus is saying these words publicly at a Jewish festival to a crowd who have gathered there at the temple in Jerusalem. Nearly 600 years after Ezekiel's vision of the temple with that river flowing from it, and there is Jesus saying those incredible words. So profound, I think, and entirely intentional, I believe. And it's also symbolic of something else. It's symbolic of the fact that Jesus, when he came to earth, he also came to take the place of the temple, because the function of the temple was that it was God's dwelling place on earth. That's the story you can read it throughout the whole of the Old Testament part of the Bible. It was the place where God met with humanity, with people. But there was a problem. No one could actually get direct access to God. There were lots of barriers in the way because God is so holy and human beings are not, that actually all that sort of is messed up with the world, the sin that we carry, all of those things that I explored a few weeks ago actually in this series in some depth. None of that can exist in the presence of God in his holiness. Something has to happen for us to come together and close that gap. And that was what Jesus did when he came to earth. That's why he suffered and died for humanity. It's why he took upon himself our sin and all that's messed up and evil in the world. And he did something about it so that he could close that holiness gap and so that we could be made holy in God's eyes, which in itself is just incredible. So if Jesus is the source of this life-giving river in Ezekiel's vision, that river which transforms the world in miraculous ways, well, what does this mean for us today? What does it mean in the everyday and the ordinary for you and I? Well, firstly, Ezekiel's vision is God's vision, isn't it? It's God's vision for us, for humanity, for all creation. It is a vision of God's kingdom. And because Jesus has bridged that gap between God and humanity, and because Jesus invites us to be in a relationship with him, this means that we get direct access to God's presence, to his holiness through Jesus. Remember, Jesus is the temple now. That's the place we can come and meet with God, which means that not only can we be transformed by God's holiness, and like that life-giving river, that can flow into us and into our hearts, which means that we're called actually to be set apart and holy. But it means that we can also bring that transformation into the world around us. And this is God's plan for us. This is his grand vision for creation, that we would be holy, we would partake in his holiness and bring about change in the world. And actually, unlike most visionaries, God doesn't actually need our help. But he invites it, doesn't he? He wants us to work with him. He wants to be in relationship with us, and he invites us to be a part of bringing his vision to life. He wants us to be agents of change. He wants to work through each of us so that we can bring nourishment and healing to a dry and dying world. It's pretty incredible when you think about it, that we get to be part of that, bringing that vision to life. But we have to be open, don't we? We have to have open hearts for that to happen. We have to be open not only to God, but open to the world around us, the needs in the world around us. And actually, the desert lands and the Dead Seas that God seeks out first are the ones in our own hearts. I was doing a little bit of research in the week about the Dead Sea. It's quite fascinating. And somebody after service came and told me some more information, which was really interesting, actually. Some of you may know about this, some of you may not, but it was all a bit new to me. I wanted to work out why the Dead Sea was so salty. Why is it that life cannot exist or be sustained there? Well, apparently there are various factors, but the main reason is that it is completely enclosed. It is shut off. It's a landlocked sea. And it exists at the lowest point on Earth. That's Earth and not sort of in the ocean. It exists at 429 meters below sea level. And it does have a primary water source, which is the Jordan River, and it is fresh water, but by the time it sort of gets down from the north, it travels all the way down to the Dead Sea, it's not so fresh anymore. And then once the water gets in there, it's got nowhere to go, which means that in the hot, dry sort of climate of the desert, that water evaporates, leaving behind all the salt and minerals it was carrying, making these incredible sort of salt deposits and making the water so salty. I don't know if anyone here has been there, or maybe you've seen people try and swim in the Dead Sea. Well, you can't swim in it, but you can sort of sit and sort of float on its surface, which is incredible, and it's quite a tourist attraction. So what this means is if the Dead Sea did have an outlet for its water, if fresh water or the water could somehow flow out from it, it would carry away some of the minerals and the salt rather than evaporating off. And this would enable the Dead Sea to be less salty and sustain life like many of our oceans. And I was sort of reflecting on this in the week, and I thought this is really profound. I feel like this gives us a great picture for the landscape of our hearts. Because if we are closed off, if we aren't willing to let God sort of work in and through us, because his holiness is not just for us alone, if we aren't willing to let his presence and his holiness transform us first and foremost, then we will remain unchanged. We will be stagnant in our hearts, and then the world around us will remain unchanged too. So what can we do, I wonder, in response to this incredible vision that God has for the world and for our lives? What is getting in the way of that vision making a difference in us and in the world around us? What is stopping you from seeing beyond the ordinary? Because there's plenty in life, isn't there, to get in the way. It might be that we are just simply closed off. Maybe our hearts are closed off for whatever reason, from the world around us, the needs around us. But more importantly than that, maybe we're just closed off from Jesus, from God, from that life-giving source. And we don't want to know. And if you are here today or connecting with us as somebody exploring faith or not sure what to make of it all, I wonder if the invitation for you is just this. Why not ask yourself, what if? What if the presence of God really can make a difference in your life? What if it can bring life to even the driest, most desperate parts of you and the world, in fact? And if you're here today as somebody, you may be a follower of Jesus, call yourself a Christian, or maybe you've been a Christian for a long time, I wonder, how is God's vision for his creation impacting your life? How is God's vision impacting your life? Because it's meant to make a difference, isn't it? How are you living in response to that incredible vision? Are you living a life that is set apart, that is different, that is holy? Are you living a life that is extraordinary because you believe in an extraordinary God? Or are there perhaps barriers, or there other visions maybe competing for your attention? And maybe you're here today and you're just facing some particularly difficult challenges in life. Maybe you're facing a situation that just seems really hopeless, lifeless, painful, and dry. And you feel like, well, this kind of vision is great, isn't it? And great for the future and all that, but it's just not reality right here, right now in my life. You know, I don't have the energy, I don't have the strength, I can't be an agent of change. And if that is you, I hear you. I honestly struggle with this sometimes. There are situations in my life, when I'm facing right now, where I just don't see change and I don't see hope. And it's so hard to hold on to that vision and let that influence the way I live my life, to hold on to that hope. But I think, I know this is where faith comes in, doesn't it? No matter how much or how little faith we think we have. And actually, it makes a difference, because that's why vision is called a vision, not a reality. Because faith tells us that one day that vision can and will become real. Faith is what encourages us to keep on going, to hold on to hope, even in dark and desperate situations. And actually, the Christian faith gives us this extraordinary vision that we have explored today, this vision of a future world where God's kingdom will flourish and it won't be held back or opposed by anything like it is in this world. And it's a kingdom which we get to be a part of building in the here and in the now. It's a kingdom that we do get to experience and have glimpses of in this lifetime. We get to see it here on earth. Because when we are tapped into the source of all life, which is Jesus, then the barren land can become fruitful. Those places which seem dead or dying can come to life. Hearts are transformed. Relationships can be restored. Communities can be changed. The world can get the nourishment and the healing that it so desperately needs. And that is through you. You and through me, through all of us. That's what God wants to do. That's his vision coming to life. It's through us, through those who are set apart, who want to share in his holiness and reflect that holiness into the world. So to wrap up, maybe there's just two questions I want to leave us with today, and hopefully these are relevant no matter where we are in our journey of faith. The first question is this: well, how does God's vision for the world impact my life? How does that vision impact my life? How am I living differently in response to that? And secondly, well, do others see the extraordinary in me? Because they should. God has given us all this great vision that goes far beyond the ordinary. It's a vision that we do get a glimpse of in this life, but we will one day be able to experience in all its fullness. That's the hope that the world needs from us. We need to carry that light and that hope that that vision will one day become reality. It's a vision that calls us to be set apart, to be agents of change and bringers of life. It is an extraordinary vision which calls us to live extraordinary lives. Let's pray together. Loving God, I just thank you for vision. I thank you for the way that vision brings change, and our world so desperately needs change. Thank you that you are the bringer and giver of life. Just pray that our hearts today will be open to you, will be open to the world around us. Where there may be barriers or things stopping your presence from transforming us and the world around us, help us to just let go today, to let your love flow through us and transform our hearts. We thank you, Jesus, that you have made a way for us to be in a relationship with our Creator God, the one who wants to change the world and bring about that vision for all eternity. Amen.